1,000 participants. They allow the organization to take stock of progress with its shareholders.
And to shed more light on the issue, we are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Ambassador Bayoumi, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you?
How are you, sir? Ambassador Bayoumi, Egypt is to host the annual meetings of the boards of governors of the African Development Bank Group. How do you see the timing of such an event in light of the new challenges to the African continent?
Very important, because we are watching and living a sort of reviving the African efforts in order to make Africa much more attractive for investment, much more intra-trade between the African countries, inviting the developed countries to invest in Africa with the Egyptian experience, and we are supported here by China, Japan, and the European Union. And now Egypt hosted the environment conference, COP27, and here the African Bank is one arm of the World Bank system. So it has the ability to finance whatever we need and whatever we agreed with them. Here today, it's announced that they are thinking to finance small and medium-sized projects, and we can make use of this, of course, in Egypt and in Africa. Africa needs a lot of new ideas in order to promote the African relations, the African inter-relations, and also to be able to support and export the exports of Africa to the world, and to the intra-trade between Africans themselves, because the intra-trade between Africans is much less than the trade of Africa towards the developed countries, because they occupy all the main sectors of production. So it is a new wave of efforts in order to make Africans more able to produce, more able to trade, more able to move also, and to ameliorate their bureaucracy, their banking system, their transport system also, and name it. It's everywhere where we can benefit from such activities.
Yes. Sir, the theme of the 2023 annual meetings of the Mobilizing Private Sector Financing for Climate and Green Growth in Africa. How do you weigh the importance of the green growth in the African continent?
Here we have two things. First, that of course the green economy is very important.
Yes.
Because in Africa we are sure that we are doing much better than others. You know that those who are making bad practices to the environment, it is the United States and China mainly, then Europe also. But in Africa, on the contrary, we have the largest forests and trees, which is producing more oxygen to our world. And I hope this will continue.
Yes.
This is number one. Number two, that the bank is keen to finance those projects which will serve the environment, and we are make use of this in Egypt. I hope that this process can continue because it is for the favor of everybody, because the environment, we share the same environment wherever we live.
Yes. Sir, how important is galvanizing the private financing domestically and internationally for the green growth in the African continent?
We have a lot to learn here, because finance is a relatively complicated issue. And we need to learn how we can get finance, how we can finance our investments and address it to the right sectors and to the right countries, how we teach other countries how to deal with the issue of finance. It's a big file, And I think Egypt can help here because we are really in a position where we are giving our experience to all the African brother countries.
Sir, how do you weigh the importance of the private financing in the field of green growth?
As you may realize with the national dialogue, the word private sector is in the deep heart of the discussions because some people do not recognize the importance of the private sector, while the government, as the Prime Minister announced, is aiming at making the private sector producing 65% of our production and hope that we can reach this.
Yes.
Governments are not good managers for certain projects. Governments can own and establish mammoth projects such as transport, such as ports, iron and steel, or Suez Canal, or this. But when it comes to the very small projects, I think this is not the task of the government, and we have to learn how to give the private sector its role in order to be able to participate enough to develop our economy in the near future.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Ambassador, how do you explain here the climate financing gap?
It is a problem, as I said, that the large industrial countries are making bad to our environment, and they do not pay to cover exactly what we need to face the environment demands. So I hope that the bank and its similar organizations can encourage bringing the reasonable and necessary finance to make our life, especially our environment, much better.
Yes.
But of course, there is a finance caused of the bad practices of the highly industrialized countries.
Yes. How would you list Africa's challenges in attracting the private sector financing in the low carbon investments?
Africa in a good position here because, as I said before, Africa is not doing bad at all to the environment. So we can continue doing our efforts in order to make sure that our industries and our investment practices are taking in consideration the conditions of good weather conditions.
Yes.
And I think Africa can do this much better than Europe or the United States or China.
Yes. What practical policies that governments can deploy to address the bottlenecks, sir?
We need to have a practical approach to convince the producers that it is in the long run in their favor to maintain good environment practices. Of course, at the beginning it costs a lot, but in the long run it will bring its results, which will be in favor of everybody, even the producers. Let us convince them by practical ways that we shall support them, we shall finance them if it costs a little bit more to adopt environment conditions, and it needs a practical approach from our governments.
Yes. On a broader scale, sir, the meeting of the boards of governors of the African Development Bank, which will take place next Tuesday in Sharm el-Sheikh, to what extent could help in increasing the level of cooperation between the different African states on the investment level as well?
We are glad to host such very important meetings, and it is a sort of propaganda for our country, to the sort of promotion for our conference center in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Yeah.
And also it is a good addition to the efforts in order to bring such an eminent organization to make its meetings in Cairo with hundreds of participants. It is tourism at the end. It is for the favor of our tourism and for the favor of our financial sector also. I'm quite sure that our central bank and our main banks are benefiting from such meetings.
Indeed. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister, always a pleasure to listen to your very precious input, sir. Always a pleasure. Flash flooding in central